She was ordered to kill the human, but instead, she fell in love with him. The silence inside the black hallway was cold and heavy like ice. Only the soft sound of boots echoed as She-Ra walked alone. She was an assassin, one of the best in the galaxy, trained to kill without feeling. Her skin was smooth and violet. Her eyes glowed bright blue like frozen fire. Her long cloak moved behind her as she walked, and 2 plasma daggers rested at her hips. Every step she took brought her closer to her target, a human prisoner. His name was Jace Carter, a lieutenant from the Earth's Defense Force. He was captured 2 weeks ago, and now he had to die. That was her order. Kill him before he speaks. Before he shares Earth's war plans, the Empress herself gave the command. And She-Ra had never failed her, not once. She reached the door, pressed her hand on the scanner, and it hissed open slowly. Inside was a small, dark cell. The only lights came from a dim red bulb above the prisoner's head. He was sitting on the floor, hands chained, his uniform torn and burned. Blood dried on his face, but his eyes were open, calm, steady. He looked up at her without fear. "You're here to kill me," he said quietly. She-Ra didn't answer. She stepped into the room. Letting the door close behind her, her fingers touched the hilt of her blade, but she didn't draw it. She stared at him. Something strange growing inside her. Chess, why wasn't he afraid? Why didn't he beg or scream like the others? "I won't stop you, Jace," said Jess. "Don't let them torture me again." His voice was soft but full of strength. There was no hate in his eyes, only pain and something else on her. She-Ra blinked slowly. Her hand dropped away from the blade. Just a little. Something felt wrong. Not with the mission, but with her. "You should hate me," she whispered. "I'm your enemy." "You're just a soldier," he replied. "Just like me." Those words hit her harder than a weapon. No one had ever spoken to her like that. She was trained to kill, not to feel, but now, standing in front of this broken human, she felt confusion and something like guilt. A loud alarm suddenly rang through the walls, an emergency signal. Footsteps echoed outside. Shouting in the alien language filled the hall. She-Ra turned to the door, heart racing. She had waited too long. The guards were coming. They would see her inside with the prisoner and ask questions if they found her without a dead body. She'd be marked a traitor. She had one choice: kill him now, or die beside him. Jace looked at her, understanding in his eyes. "You have to make a choice," he said calmly. "Whatever you do, I understand." She-Ra closed her eyes for a second. Then she reached into her cloak, pulled out a small energy knife fan, slashed the chains from his wrists. Jace gasped, looking down at his hands. "Now free. What are you doing?" he asked in disbelief. "I don't know," she said. "But I can't kill you." The door flashed red. Someone was trying to open it. She-Ra grabbed Jace's arm and pulled him to his feet. He winced in pain, but followed. They ran to the back wall, where a small service hatch was hidden behind crates. She kicked it open, and together they crawled inside just as the door behind them opened. Guards stepped into the cell and found it empty. Only the broken chains remained inside the narrow tunnel. She-Ra breathed hard. Jace was behind her, crawling with weak arms, blood dripping from his elbow. "You're helping me escape," he said. "Why?" She didn't answer right away. Then she said softly, "Maybe I'm tired of killing people who don't deserve to die." For the first time in her life, she had disobeyed a direct order. For the first time, she had chosen mercy. She didn't know what would happen next, but one thing was clear: her mission had just changed. Now, she wasn't the hunter. Now, she was running too. The tunnel was dark, narrow, and cold. Metal scraped against their arms as they crawled forward. Jace's breath was heavy, his wounds still fresh. She-Ra moved ahead, fast and silent. Like a shadow, her heart was beating too fast, and not just from the danger. She had never done anything like this before. She had broken the rules, betrayed her people, and saved a human. She didn't even know why. Behind them, footsteps thundered. The guards had discovered the open hatch. Shira stopped, grabbed Jace's hand, and whispered, "Hold your breath." Then she reached into her belt and threw a small cube behind them. A second later, a burst of smoke filled the tunnel with a sharp hiss. Coughing voices echoed from behind, but Shira and Jace kept moving. The tunnel ended in a small chamber full of broken wires and old crates. Jace leaned against the wall, coughing, his body shaking. Shira knelt beside him and touched the side of his neck, checking his pulse. "You need medical help," she said. More to herself than to him, he smiled weakly and replied, "Didn't expect you to care." "I don't," she lied. But her voice was too soft to sound true. Jace laughed, then winced in pain. "You're terrible at lying." She looked away, angry at herself for letting him get to her. She should have left him behind, but now they were stuck together. And something deep inside her didn't want to let go. There was no going back, not now. She had to get off the warship before the guards locked it down. Only one way out: the emergency hangar. She knew a path, but it was long, full of security drones and locked doors. They didn't have weapons, and Jace could barely walk. Still, she helped him stand, and he leaned on her as they moved forward. The halls outside were full of flashing red lights. Voices shouted commands, and the ship's alarm pulsed like a heartbeat. Shira moved quickly, using her memory to avoid the patrols. She guided Jace through maintenance shafts, elevator tubes, and even a trash duct. At one point, they hid behind a power generator while a squad of armed guards passed just meters away. Jace tried not to breathe, but his chest was burning. Shira reached out and touched his arm gently, her eyes watching him with something like concern. When the guards were gone, they kept moving. Every step was harder, every corner more dangerous. Shira knew her time was running out soon. The ship would go into full lockdown, and all exits would be sealed. Finally, they reached the emergency hangar. It was quiet for now. A single escape pod stood ready in the center of the room, its engine blinking green, but across from it stood two guards. Fully armed, watching the doors, Jace whispered, "We'll never get past them." Shira looked at the guards, then at the small tool in her hand. She only had one chance. She gave Jace a look that said, "Trust me." Then she stood, walked out from cover, and shouted in her own language. The guards turned in surprise, raising their weapons. Before they could fire, Shira threw the tool. It flashed bright blue and exploded with a loud crack. The blast wasn't strong, but it was enough to knock the guards off balance. Shira ran, grabbed one of the rifles, and shot both before they could stand again. It was fast, brutal, and clean. She turned back to Jace, who was still hiding. Stunned, "You coming or not?" she asked, her voice calm but firm. He got up and limped toward her. Together, they ran to the escape pod and climbed inside. Shira quickly pressed the launch code, and the pod doors closed with a hiss. Through the window, the hangar faded away as the pod shot into space. Jace collapsed onto the floor, breathing hard. Shira sat down beside him, her hands shaking slightly. For a long time, they said nothing. Just listened to the soft hum of the engine. Finally, Jace looked at her and said, "You didn't have to save me," she replied. "Maybe not." Then added quietly, "But I wanted." Too far behind them, the warship became a dot in the stars. Shira stared at it, knowing she could never return. She was a traitor now, hunted by her own kind. And next to her sat the human she was ordered to kill. She had no idea where they were going, but she knew one thing for sure: there was no turning back. Stars stretched across the black sky like rivers of light. The escape pod floated quietly, far from the warship, drifting into unknown space inside. Shira sat in the pilot's seat, staring at the map. No destination, no orders, no home. Just one human beside her still alive because she couldn't pull the blade. Jace was silent, eyes half closed, but awake. His breathing was slow and heavy, and he was clearly in pain. The pod had basic medical supplies, but not enough. Shira found a healing patch and pressed it gently to his side. He winced, then looked at her, confused. "You sure you're not going to kill me later?" he asked, half joking. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she said, "Why weren't you afraid of me?" Jace gave a weak smile. "I've seen fear before. Real fear. It's loud and wild, but when you walked in, you looked like someone who was sad." Shira turned her face away, but his words stayed in her mind. Sad? Was that what she had become? A killer with too many ghosts. A loud beep interrupted her thoughts. The pod screen flashed red scanners had picked up a nearby moon. It was small, gray, and marked as uninhabited, but had breathable air. They couldn't stay in open space forever. They needed to land, hide, and let Jace recover. Shira locked in the coordinates, and the pod began to shake as it entered the moon's weak atmosphere. Outside, gray clouds swirled like smoke, and black rocks covered the surface below the landing. Was rough, sparks flying as the pod skidded across the rocky field before stopping with a loud crunch. Silence returned. Jace groaned but managed to sit up. "Still alive," he muttered. "Good sign." Shira opened the hatch, letting cold air rush inside. She stepped out first, eyes scanning the area with sharp eyes. Ruins of some old alien outpost stood nearby, broken and empty. It looked like no one had been here in years. Maybe decades. She turned back, offering her hand to help Jace climb down. He took it, his grip weak but warm. Together, they moved toward the ruins. It was quiet, too. Quiet. Inside a half-destroyed building, they found shelter. A working heater hummed in the corner, barely alive, but enough to keep them warm. Shira set up a small defense field around the entrance, just in case. Then she sat across from Jace, staring at him. "You still don't trust me?" he said, voice soft. "I don't even trust myself," she replied. Night came quickly on the moon. The sky turned deep purple, and strange stars blinked in patterns Shira didn't recognize. She tried to sleep, but her mind was full of noise. Images of the Empress. The mission, her blade, and Jace's eyes. She had been trained since childhood to follow orders. Now, she was running from them, all for a man she met just hours ago. Suddenly, the ground trembled. Just for a second, a low sound echoed from deep underground, like metal grinding. Shira stood quickly, weapon drawn. Scanning the shadows, Jace sat up, alert. "What was that?" "I don't know," she said, her voice sharp. But it wasn't natural. They waited in silence. Every second stretching like a thread. Then a small screen in the corner flickered to life. An ancient signal someone was still listening. A message appeared, broken and full of static. But clear enough. Unauthorized escape pod detected bounty-issued targets. 1 human soldier. 1 traitor-class assassin. Shira's heart sank. They had been found. The message continued. Kill on sight. She looked at Jace, who was already reaching for a broken metal pipe. His only weapon. She shook her head slowly and said, "That won't be enough." Then, without emotion, she added, "They're coming for us." The moon was no longer quiet. Sparks flashed in the dark sky as 3 dropships broke through the clouds. They didn't hide, they didn't sneak, they came loud and proud. Hunting, Shira stood on the roof of the broken outpost. Wind blowing her cloak, eyes cold. She didn't flinch as the first ship touched down. She didn't move when the second followed. Jace was inside, setting up what little defense tech the ruins still had. Old drones, a half-working turret, and a motion sensor that buzzed every 10 seconds. It wasn't much, but it was all they had. He limped as he worked, each step a sharp reminder of his broken body, but he didn't stop. Not now, not with her outside, alone. Shira watched the drop doors open. Out stepped tall soldiers in silver armor. Her people hunters from her own squad. The lead warrior removed her helmet, long black hair flowing free. It was Vena, Shira's old partner, and the one who trained. Beside her for years, her face was stone, her eyes empty. She looked up at Shira, then raised her voice through a speaker. "Come down," Vena said. "Surrender and die quickly." Shira didn't reply. Her plasma blades slid from her wrists, glowing faint blue. "You trained me." Shira shouted back, "So you know I won't." "Die easy." Vena's voice was calm. "I trained you, yes, and I will end you." The hunters spread out, moving through the rocks with sharp steps inside. Jace activated the turret. It coughed once, then spun up slowly. The ruins became a battlefield in seconds. Shots fired, explosions rang out, and the night lit up like a dying star. Shira moved like lightning, her blades dancing in the dark, one by one. She dropped the soldiers with clean strikes, no wasted movement, but there were too many. And her energy was fading. A blast threw her back into the wall, her cloak burning. Jace fired a pulse rifle. He had pulled from a fallen soldier. The recoil hit his wounded side hard, but he stayed on his feet. He covered Shira as she crawled back behind the broken wall. Blood ran down her arm, her breathing heavy. She looked at Jace, surprised to see him still standing. "You fight like a fool," she said, almost smiling. "And you fall like a rock," he replied, coughing but still shooting. A second drop. Ship landed behind them. More enemies, more death. Shira touched the side of her head. Opening a private signal, her voice was low, nearly a whisper. "Old code, Assassin Class Echo 7. There was silence, then a beep. A hidden panel opened behind the wall, revealing a forgotten weapon, an old fusion pulse cannon, dusty but loaded. She dragged it out, eyes burning. "This was built for killing gods," she said. "Let's see if it still works." Jace limped to her side, helped her aim it. Outside, Vena was preparing for the final attack. Her squad moved in formation, closing in for the kill. Shira whispered, "This ends now." She fired, and the cannon roared. A beam of white-hot energy blasted through the battlefield. Dust and fire filled the air, bodies thrown like toys. Even Vena was knocked back. Armor cracked, eyes wide, smoke rose over the ruins, and for a moment, there was silence again. Shira dropped the cannon, her hands shaking. Jace leaned against her, both breathing hard, both alive for now, but she knew it wasn't over. This was just the first wave, and behind them, buried deep in the earth, something else had awakened. Something ancient, something watching. The ground hummed under their feet, low and steady. Jace looked down, his voice tight. "Tell me that's not what I think it is." Shira didn't answer. She just stared at the ground, her voice almost a whisper. "This moon." It was never just empty. The ground trembled again, stronger this time. A deep, humming sound pulsed from beneath the ruins, like the breathing of a giant creature hidden below. Shira and Jace stood still, eyes wide. Smoke from the earlier battle curled into the air. But now it was the silence that screamed louder. Jace spoke first, his voice rough. "That sound. It's not just coming from below, it's alive." Shira moved quickly, brushing dust off an old wall and revealing strange symbols glowing faint blue. She placed her hand on them, and the floor vibrated harder. "This place," she whispered. "It's not just an outpost, it's a lock." A crack split the center of the ruins, and from it rose a tall, thin structure, a black monolith, humming softly with power. Energy danced along its surface like lightning crawling on glass. Shira stepped back, shaking her head. No one said anything about ancient machines. Jace stared at the monolith, then at Shira. This was buried under us the whole time. You think they knew? Shira's voice was low and cold. The Empress doesn't send soldiers to clean up mistakes. She sends assassins to bury secrets. The monolith flashed once, just once, and a wave of invisible energy spread across the moon. It knocked down fallen weapons, blew out their defense field, and shattered what was left of the sky tower far above. The remaining dropship lost power and fell in a slow, burning spiral, crashing into the ridge behind them. Jace staggered, catching his balance. Shira caught his arm, pulling him up as another tremor shook the ruins. From the far side of the battlefield, Vayna crawled from debris, her armor smoking, one eye bloodied. She looked at the monolith and screamed into her comms. Pull back now. It's waking up." But there was no one left to hear her. The soldiers were gone, scattered, dead, or running, and from the cracked earth, something rose. A tall figure made of ancient metal and glowing veins. It stood over 3 meters high, silent, unmoving at first. Then it turned toward the monolith, and then toward them. Shira stepped in front of Jace, blades drawn again. "What is that?" Jace asked, voice shaking. "I think," she said slowly, "it's a guardian." The metal being raised one hand, and the monolith pulsed again. A second beam shot into the sky, straight into the stars. A signal ancient and wide-reaching. Far beyond the moon, they had awakened something more than a weapon. They had activated a beacon. Jace looked at her, worry written across his face. "Did we just alert the whole galaxy?" Shira nodded once, slowly, and not the friendly kind. She grabbed his hand without thinking and pulled him behind a collapsed. "Well, we have 10 minutes, maybe less," she said. Before something answers that call, Jace tried to keep up, stumbling on the broken ground. "Where do we go?" "There's a vault," Shira replied. "Buried deep in this place, the builders always left a core chamber. We hide, regroup, and figure out why that thing didn't kill us yet." As they descended into the tunnels below, the Guardian above remained still, watching the stars, its body lit with codes running like rivers across its armor, unreadable and old. For now, it did nothing, but its silence felt like a warning. And somewhere in deep space, across star systems and wormholes, ships began to move, sleepers began to stir, and signals began to blink for the first time in 1,000 years. Down in the vault, Jace leaned against the wall and whispered. "Remind me again what your mission was," Shira answered without looking back. "Kill the human." She turned to him with a dry smile. Her face tired, but still alive. Too late for that now. The vault door closed behind them with a heavy slam, sealing the tunnel in total darkness for a second. Then soft blue lights flickered on, lining the walls like fireflies trapped in glass. Shira led the way without speaking, her steps careful, her shoulders tense. Jace followed close, his body weak, but his mind racing. They reached the heart of the vault, a chamber older than any system map. Metal walls curved inward like a giant steel womb, pulsing gently with power. In the center was a circular platform surrounded by floating hologram symbols, stars, strange languages no longer spoken. Shira stepped forward and raised her hand. The chamber responded instantly, scanning her with beams of light. But then it paused, the lights flickered, and instead of rejecting her, the vault accepted her presence. The air around them grew warmer, almost welcoming. Jace blinked, confused. "Why would it let you in?" Shira didn't answer right away. She touched one of the symbols, and a map lit up, one filled with red marks across the stars. Dead worlds, locked systems, old war zones. At the very center of the map was their current location, glowing gold, a heartbeat in a galaxy full of scars. I think, she said slowly, this place doesn't see species. It sees something else. Jace leaned closer, his voice quiet. Like what? Intention, Shira whispered. It knows I chose to save you. They stood in silence as the map began to shift, showing movement, rows, waves, fleets. Something big was coming. Drawn by the beacon they triggered, Jace watched it carefully, eyes narrowing. That's a warpath, Shira nodded. Someone built this vault to warn others, she said, to hide from what's coming above them. The metal guardian remained standing, motionless under the alien sky. But deep inside the vault, a different signal began to pulse, one not meant for weapons, but for memory. A projection blinked to life. A tall figure of light, not alien, not human, something in between. Its face was soft, voice clear and ancient. If you've entered this chamber, it said, then the final cycle has begun. Preserve what matters, not power, not victory, but bond. Jace stared at the figure, then turned to Shira. Did it just say bond? Shira looked away, suddenly unsure. I was raised to believe emotions were a weakness, she said. But I feel stronger now than I ever did on the battlefield. He moved closer to her, standing just inches away. We're still being hunted, he said. Your people, my people, and now whatever's answering that signal. But if this place chose us, maybe it's telling us to choose something too. She met his eyes, her voice softer than it had ever been. I made my choice the second I didn't kill you. Suddenly, alarms echoed again, this time inside the vault. The door at the far end lit up. Motion detected. Something was coming down the tunnel. Slowly, steadily. Not a soldier, not a fleet, just one figure, walking alone. Shira stepped forward, eyes narrowing. Whoever it is, she said. They followed us through everything. The door hissed open, steam pouring out, and standing. In the middle was Vena, her armor scorched, one arm broken, but her weapon still in hand. She looked at Shira, then at Jace. Her voice cracked but clear. You chose him, she said. You betrayed everything. Shira didn't flinch. I chose peace. Vena raised her weapon slowly, her fingers shaking. But then she saw Jace step between them, not with a gun, but just his body. No more killing, he said. Not here. Vena stared at him, and for one long moment, everything was still. Then, with a slow breath, she dropped the gun. Tears ran down her face, not from pain, but from the weight of everything she'd lost. Shira walked to her, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. We don't have to be what they made us. Outside, above the vault, the stars began to shift. Dozens of objects were entering the system, fast and bright. The enemy was almost here. But deep below, something stronger was forming, not an army, a bond, and maybe, just maybe, that would be enough. The stars were falling from the edge of the system. Dozens of ships came into views, sleek, dark, and massive. They moved in silence, without signal, without code, the kind of silence that meant one thing: war. Inside the ancient vault, the final lights came alive, revealing one last chamber. Shira, Jace, and even Vena stood inside it now. Their past roles burned away. Enemy, assassin, traitor, all meaningless now. The vault had chosen them not for who they were, but for what they could become. At the center of the room, a platform began to rise. Slow and smooth, on it sat a sphere, cracked and glowing with gold veins. It pulsed like a heart, ancient but still alive. What is that? Jace asked, stepping closer. Shira moved beside him. Voice steady. A memory core, she said. From before the old wars. This whole place wasn't built to fight. It was built to remind. The hologram returned, flickering, fading, but still speaking. Your species will fight, it said. but only those who remember can survive what comes. Jace reached toward the sphere the moment his fingers touched it. A flash of light burst across the vault. Images filled the air, planets burning, machines rising, alliances crumbling. Then hope's small moments of peace, of connection, of impossible trust. Among them were scenes of humans and aliens standing side by side, not as enemies, but as one. Then the light vanished. The vault went still, the core dimmed. But didn't die outside. The enemy ships circled the moon. Ready to strike, She-Ra turned to Venna, her voice calm. "You saw what I saw." Venna nodded, her face pale. "They'll destroy this place, like they destroyed the others." Jace looked at both of them. And for the first time since his capture, there was fire in his eyes. "Then we give them a reason to hesitate." Together, they activated the vault's last defense. A signal booster tied to the ancient core. If the enemy attacked, the core would release its memories broadcast across systems, across species. The truth would go viral. A reminder of peace before the next war could begin. But it came with a price. The broadcast would destroy the vault and everything inside. She-Ra didn't blink. She turned to Jace, her voice softer now. "You were my mission," she said. "But you became my reason." Jace touched her cheek gently. "I never asked for a hero," he said, "but I found one anyway." The countdown started. Outside, the ships began charging weapons. The sky above turned white with energy. Inside, the three of them stood close. Not as soldiers, not as targets, but as messengers. Messengers of something greater than war. 10 seconds, 9. Jace reached for She-Ra's hand. She took it without hesitation. Venna stepped forward, her good arm across her chest in silent respect. 8, 7, 6. The vault glowed with golden light. Its walls humming one last time. Above, the enemy ships fired. 5, 4. The beam struck the surface. The vault erupted in light, not firelight. Bright enough to be seen from orbit. Bright enough to reach other moons, other worlds. 3, 2. The signal burst out, faster than light, carrying every memory, every truth, every moment of love. Choice and sacrifice. 1, then silence, total and complete. No wreckage, no screams, just a quiet moon spinning slowly in space. And across the galaxy, receivers blinked to life. Screens filled with forgotten history. Leaders paused, soldiers hesitated. And for the first time in a long time, someone listened. In the middle of it all was one line, carved into the signal, eternal and clear. She was ordered to kill the human, but instead she fell in love with him.